Hey, it's another fan fiction reading, and yeah, I'm taking a break on Awoken for a little bit, so I decided to check on a new one. I am now going to read Hush Now, Quiet Now. Let us begin. It was late in the night. Luna's moon still hung high in the sky, and most every pony was sleeping peacefully except for one. Fluttershy tossed and turned, sweat breaking out on her brow. "No," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." She lied. "No." After a moment, her voice petered off into disjointed mumbling. She gritted her teeth, caught in the grip of a nightmare that refused to let her go. Suddenly, she woke, sobbing quietly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean it. You left me no choice." A beam of sunlight slanted through the window, illuminating golden motes of dust that floated through the air. It was this beam of light that woke the canary yellow Pegasus sprawl on the bed. Fluttershy's eyes snapped open, one pupil contracting to a pinpoint in response to the light. For a moment she just stared through the window, following the ray that had stirred her from her slumber. It took her a moment to realize the source of the light. When she did, she forced herself out of bed, muscles aching in protest. Her sleep had been fitful, to say the least. The nightmares were back again, lending visions of such horror that she had almost afraid to sleep. Over and over during the night she'd awoken up screaming, heart hammering in response to some unknown terror. But even sleep deprived as she was, she refused to neglect her animals. Even though her eyes had difficulty focusing and she swayed on her hooves, she still made sure to deposit a couple of carrots in a bowl for Angel and add a scoop of sunflower seeds to the feeders outside. The birds were unusually quiet that morning, but Fluttershy was quick to attribute that to the early hour. Even Angel was still asleep in his bed. The Pegasus forced her aching muscles into action, despite her fervent protests from their treatment during the night. It had been 2 weeks since the first nightmare, 2 long weeks. Every night since then she had been plagued by awful dreams, each more horrid than the last. She could never remember them when she woke up, but then again she didn't really want to. The cold sweat they left her in was all in the indication she needed in that regard. It was bad enough to lose the sleep she did over them. The effect they would have on her waking life was one she didn't want to contemplate. I should probably see Twilight about that, she thought as she walked towards Ponyville, with no particular destination in mind. In fact, she was just about to head to the library when she remembered Twilight was out of town. Oddly, she hadn't told any pony where she was going, or that she was going anywhere. Her friend had already demonstrated some eccentricities. Fluttershy trotted past the library, which had stood empty for several days, ever since Twilight had left. For a moment she debated visiting Sugarcube Corner to get some comforting sweets, but then remembered Pinkie Pie had left town with the cakes the day before. They also hadn't told any pony that they were going anywhere. But Pinkie was prone to impulsiveness, probably nothing to worry about. As the newest realization occurred to her, she slowed to a walk. Some of the spring faded from her step. If any of her friends would be able to help her with her nightmares, it would be one of those two. The Pegasus glanced towards the pharmacy, noticing the slightly askew open sign on the door. She let herself in, jumping slightly as a bell tinkled above her head. Fluttershy, the stallion behind the counter called. Good to see you. How's the medication I prescribed for Angel working? Fluttershy frowned, slightly confused. Medication? She didn't even remember Angel being sick. She shrugged it off, blaming it again on the lack of sleep. Just fine. He's looking a lot better. The pharmacist, whose name currently escaped her, grinned. Good to hear that. Now what can I do for you? His smile faded as Fluttershy's unkempt state sank in. You okay? You're looking a little scruffy. Fluttershy tried to smile reassuringly, but it came out as more of a pained grimace. I've just been having trouble sleeping. That's why I'm here. The pharmacist nodded in sympathy. I hear you. Insomnia is a nasty thing. Oh, it's not insomnia, Fluttershy said. I've been having nightmares, and was wondering, dreamless sleeps, what you're after, huh? The pharmacist cut in. Fluttershy glared at him. That was twice now. She hated being cut off. It made her feel unimportant. She never told anyone, but it annoyed her more than anything else. The stallion was facing away from her, rummaging through the shelves behind him. I've got just the thing. Give me a moment. Pegasus gritted her teeth as an uncharacteristically violent rage exploded inside her. The pharmacist kept talking to her, bringing out a pair of small glass pill bottles. He turned back around, his friendly smile fading when he saw Fluttershy's expression. What's the look for? Do you prefer drops? Fluttershy blinked. It took her a moment to recognize her surroundings. She was standing on the bank of a river that ran beside the town. The Pegasus frowned in consternation. How did she get there? Wasn't she just talking to the Fluttershy's brow wrinkled as she racked her brain. Where had she been before this? Something to do with... After a moment, she gave up. She simply couldn't remember. Might as well just sit here for a moment and listen to the birds in the trees. Their song was a familiar, comforting melody, and she soon found herself humming along with them. She hadn't realized how little bird song she heard at her house, despite the feeders she had hung outside. The Pegasus smiled, serenely closing her eyes in bliss. This was something she could spend all day listening to. Her nostrils wrinkled slightly as a cloying, metallic scent drifted past. Within moments it became stronger until it was nearly overpowering. Fluttershy took a step back, eyes flashing open. It took her a moment to realize that she was looking at, and when she did, she scrambled backwards, stifling a scream. Blood? The river is full of blood. The rushing stream was now sluggish and languid, and dyed a deep crimson. Her hoof bumped against something that gave off a dull clack. Fluttershy forced herself to look down, despite the voice of reason screaming at her to forget all this and run, just run. But she looked down anyway. The sticks and bits of driftwood that lined the sides of the river were gone, replaced by a hideous collection of bones, some bleached by the sun, some still with strands of muscle and sinew hanging off them. The Pegasus backed up in horror, her back hoofs skidding off a unicorn's skull and crunching through a yellowed rib cage. And through it all, the birds continued to sing, a perverse parody of the scene before her. The stench of blood and decay clogged the air as the river of blood flowed on and on. Now she ran, crashing through underbrush without a thought for her own safety, ignoring the line of blood that appeared on her chest after being whipped by a branch. On she ran, sobbing in terror, wishing she could just fall asleep and leave this hideous vision behind. Except she couldn't sleep, not with her nightmare still plaguing her, the one refuge every sentient being could always take on was denied to her. Twisted by visions even more horrid than the one that still tormented her, she kept running even when she had left the brush behind her, barely able to notice that she was headed back toward Ponyville. She just ignored the shocked glances of a pair of unicorns as she galloped past them, driven to near mindlessness in her terror. One Earth pony placed herself in the terrified Pegasus' path, shouting something in a distant part of her recognized as her name. When Fluttershy didn't stop, the muted orange pony lowered her head, planted her hooves, and physically stopped the Pegasus. She placed her hooves on Fluttershy's shoulder, saying something in a loud voice. Fluttershy blinked, and then the ground rushed up to meet her, and everything went black. Fluttershy! Fluttershy! The Pegasus forced her eyes open, squinting against the light. It took a moment for Applejack's concerned face to swim into focus in front of her. Applejack smiled. You're awake? Good. I was worried. I have to lug you back to the farm myself. She put a good farcade, but a quaver in her voice betrayed her nervousness. Fluttershy cleared her throat, feeling as if she just swallowed a bucket of coals. What happened? She whispered, voice hoarse and rusty. Applejack's smile faded. You don't remember? You came charging out of the forest like an Ursa Major was chasing you. The Pegasus rubbed her forehead with a hoof. I did? I just... She shook her head in an attempt to clear it. So tired. I can't even think, she whispered. I can't even remember anything I did today. Every time I sleep. Applejack took a step back. Fluttershy, I want to tell you what's wrong. This isn't you. Her voice was high with panic. Fluttershy held her head in her hooves, moaning. It felt like iron spikes were being driven into her skull. Nightmares, she managed. Horrible dreams. I can't sleep. I haven't slept. Can't remember. She felt a hoof on her back. Fluttershy, don't worry. I'll help you. It's too bad Twilight's out of town. Fluttershy cringed at the sound of the unicorn's name, letting out an involuntary whimper. Otherwise, she could do something of her magic and help you, Applejack finished. Edging away, the bitter tang of the fear started to make its way into her subconsciousness. Something here was very, very wrong. She tried to help me, Fluttershy thought. Eyes wide, yet unseen, she tried and failed. They can't help me. No pony can. Who tried to help? Applejack asked. Twilight? Fluttershy froze. She hadn't meant to say it out loud. Believe me, Applejack was saying, whatever it is, there's always some pony who can help. Not me, whispered Fluttershy. You can't help me. You can't stop me. I can't. Fluttershy, look at me. The Pegasus stared at the ground. Look at me. Applejack snapped, grabbing her head in her hooves and tilting her head up. The moment Fluttershy saw her friend, she knew that everything she said was a lie. Applejack was smiling cruelly as if the entire mess was some sick joke. This pony didn't want to help her. Let go of me, Fluttershy snarled, twisting free of Applejack's grasp. I see what you want. But Fluttershy, Applejack said, creeping closer, I just want to help. That sultry grin was still plastered on her face, mocking Fluttershy's terror. No, you don't! Fluttershy screamed, lashing out with a hoof. She connected squarely with the Pegasus, with the pressure point on Applejack's jaw, sending the Earth Pony to the ground. It took a moment for what she'd just done to occur to her. She quickly glanced around, making sure no pony else had seen her. Nothing good. They could pretend to be concerned, shower her with their false sympathy. But they didn't really understand. They didn't want to understand. They were all against her, laughing at her downfall. The Pegasus hissed in a rage, pawing at the ground. Well, if she was going to hit rock bottom, they were coming with her. Something new appeared in Fluttershy's eyes, something that had Applejack been conscious would have sent her running for the hills. Fluttershy looked back down at the unconscious pony at her hooves, a horrible gurgling laugh escaping her mouth. She tried to stop it, but found she couldn't. The situation was just so absurd. It took a few minutes for her laughter to peter off, but when it did, the seriousness of the situation suddenly came to her. Any pony else saw that had happened, they would jump to conclusions. All they needed was an excuse to turn on her, and this would be a perfect opportunity. Her imagination conjured up an image of desultory Pegasus fixed in a stockade, face smeared with rotten vegetables and other refuse. I always told you she was unbalanced. It was only a matter of time. String her up. I want to see her burn. Kill her. She had come to Twilight for help. She remembered now the unicorn had smiled weakly, giving her some line about how dreams were beyond the influence of magic. Lies, all lies, the unicorn had lied to her face, and done it with a smile. Fluttershy had no regrets about what she'd done. It was almost funny that no pony had thought to check in the library's basement. The dragon had been a bit more difficult, thick scales and all. She had to poison him, force Twilight's stalk of deadly nightshade down his throat. It hadn't been pleasant, but she was beyond caring. With no recollection of what she'd done, she'd gone to Pinkie Pie. The pony had laughed at her troubles, claiming it was the best type of medicine. Her laughter had become steadily more mocking, until Fluttershy was forced to silence it. The cakes hadn't done anything, but they'd seen. They couldn't be allowed to spread their panic words around the town. Now, could they? They wanted to see her fall anyway. In any case, the most recent batch of pastries had been given a special edition. It was almost surprising how many dull knives were found in Sugar Cube Corner. In retrospect, the cakes probably wished they sharpened a few of them. It was lucky no pony had heard them scream. Fluttershy had had nearly enough of the blood at that point, but Applejack had seen. She knew she had to be silenced. Fluttershy felt a moment's regret for having to do this to her friend, but the memory of her slow grin quickly dispelled it. She was just like the rest of them, and she would do everything she could to watch Fluttershy burn. "No, Fluttershy," snarled. "I won't let them." She gathered up the prone earth pony, grunting from the strain. Applejack was heavier than she expected, but after a moment of effort, she succeeded in lifting her off the ground and taking her to the air. So Applejack wanted to help her. Well, now she wanted to help Applejack. That's what friends did for each other, after all. And that is the end of